Hi, I'm an addict named David.
Hi, David.
Very grateful to be here. And there's very few people who could be as happy to see 800 or 900 people, because the programming committee promised me 7,000. So this is a very manageable group, assuming that I were a manager, which, thank God, just for today I don't have to be. Theme of your convention is just for today. And to me, this reminds me of a passage in our readings which says we have but a daily reprieve. Or maybe it's in the basic text. That means that the disease of addiction does not take a holiday, so my recovery can't take a holiday either. You know, I'm on a week's vacation. I'm away from work. I'm away from my responsibilities, except for this one. But the disease came right along with me. And I'm attending another convention along with this one in Long Beach. It's a Mensa convention. And I noticed when I arrived there that I felt ill at ease and out of place and as though I didn't quite belong. And, who are these people and why should they like me? Just like an addict. And then I began to attend recovery meetings, and I began to attend consciousness-raising meetings, and very quickly I felt right at home. I felt like I belonged, and I felt like I had my place. The same thing happens at almost every NA group or NA convention that I attend. To this day, there's very few NA groups that I walk into that I don't at first feel a little leery or out of place, and I think that that's like a ghost of my addiction. We have ghosts that tend to follow us, ancient habits that die hard. This is also Independence Day. Happy 4th of July. And just for today, we celebrate our independence from oppression, our independence from persecution, our independence from some benighted power that has us by the throat and tells us what to do. Sounds like our disease of addiction to me. If we work together, that is, if we have an Interdependence Day, then we can stay free from this disease. But there's an important aspect to the concept of interdependence, and that is that you need me like I need you. I've heard speakers say, well, NA will get along just fine without me. I don't know that that's true for sure. I don't know that we have anyone to spare. I believe we need everyone in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, even the worst members. Why? They serve as a bad example. We always have to have somebody in the back of the room chattering and ragging on people so everyone can say, see, that's who you shouldn't copy. Forgive me today if I respect your independence and your intelligence. Forgive me if instead of talking down to you, I talk up to you. Because I respect the intelligence of the members of Narcotics Anonymous. I believe that most of us are above average in intelligence from my observation. We're not here for being stupid, we're here for being crazy. And it's important to make that distinction clearly. Why does a highly intelligent person do stupid things? It's not because he's stupid, it's because he's nuts. When I hear people say, I can't believe I was so stupid. No, just being an addict, There's a card in the tarot deck called the Fool, and it shows somebody stepping off a cliff while playing a flute and looking off into thin air. Reminds me of every addict I know. Sure reminds me of me. Anyway, forgive me if I don't do this exactly the same way that everyone else does. I'm going to declare my independence and not tell a lot of stories. My stories are rather boring. I'm just one addict. And my content has more to do with our program of recovery and less to do with my personal story. I remember one meeting when I was sharing about how I thought about God and how I thought about recovery. And one lady came up to me after the meeting all furious, and she said, "We don't do that here. We talk about our experience." And I thought, well, we also talk about our strength and our hope. My experience is what I've been through, and my strength is what I bring to recovery now. And my hope is my better beliefs, my positive beliefs, and also my positive expectations for the future. We share our experience, strength, and hope here. And you know, my experiences are awful pedestrian. They're a lot like yours. They're not that different. What's important is what we have in common. I don't care if you hit your bottom in the suburbs or in the gutter. The feelings are the same. See, at my bottom, I was fired from my job, being kicked out of my apartment. I had crud in the kitchen sink this thick. The lights had been turned off. The phone had been turned off. None of my friends would call. Well, they couldn't. The phone had been turned off. And I thought my life was over. You know, I thought that's the end of my good times. Little did I know. I've had much more fun in recovery than I did using. You know, I used to use behind 3 locked doors. Why? Because I was sure every cop in the world was outside my front door. I heard him. You know, I was sure I was in a square complex. I was sure there were people with telescopes on the other side spying on me. And I thought I was having fun. Well, spare me that kind of fun just for today. If you stick with me, and if you're very well behaved, you seem like a very well behaved group. If you're very well behaved, before I'm done, I'll tell you about the meaning and the purpose of life. That's a tall order, right? But we give ourselves a break just for today. You know, I'm reminded, talking about Independence Day, of Emma Lazarus's poem, The New Colossus, about the Statue of Liberty, where she wrote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Reminds me of the greeters in my home group. You know, sometimes all you really need to get through the day is a hug. So I'd like to ask, is there anybody here who has not been hugged today? I see a hand or two. For the sake of the person who hasn't been hugged, can we take a moment and give each other a hug? Everybody, hug your neighbor. Okay, thanks. Okay. Thank you. They say that addicts don't follow directions well. We don't want to hug just our neighbor. We want to hug everybody. One of the greatest gifts that I've heard and experienced in the rooms and in my recovery is a gift of a sense of humor. I pity addicts who lack a sense of humor. I think that that's sort of like being tone deaf. I've been taught that that's a sign of an advanced spiritual state, that you have a sense of humor. You recognize the absurd. You hear the cosmic laughter. You know that life is but a dream. You know not to take all this stuff too seriously. You know, I have a saying, it's only a situation, not an emergency. And I remember one period in my recovery going through a lot of ordeal, and I kept saying to myself, it's only a situation, not an emergency. It's only a situation, not an emergency. And I realized, if I keep this up, on the day I die, I'll say, It's only a situation, not an emergency. And I hope to sustain that level of peace of mind. I don't know if any of you have heard of John Lennon. On the White Album, he said, I'll give you everything I've got for a little peace of mind. And he was a multimillionaire by that point, but that just shows how out of control his life was. The life of an addict can be awful difficult. In my clean time, I've had to deal with death. My mother passed away in '92 of cancer. My father passed away this last February of cancer, liver cancer. My sponsor, you probably have heard of Greg P., wonderful man. He passed away in April of cancer, liver cancer, same as my dad. It was difficult going through these experiences. I had a rush of sorrow and difficult emotions, and how can I cope? And one of the funny things that happened on each of those days is that I laughed. I never thought I would laugh on the days that my parents died. It just showed me that not everything is tragedy. And even if in the middle of tragedy you can laugh, then you're moving towards a balanced life. See, it's not a shame to laugh when you're feeling sorrow. It's not a shame to cry when you're feeling happy. The only shame comes from living in suppression and oppression all the time. The only shame is in denying ourselves and denying our laughter. So, okay, how many addicts does it take to change a light bulb? 2, one to come up with the $10 and the other to promise to be right back with a light bulb. There's another version. How many addicts does it take to change a light bulb? Only one. He holds the bulb up in the air and waits for the world to revolve around him. And there's another version. How many addicts does it take to change a light bulb? What do you mean, change? Okay. Do you know what many addicts are using these days for birth control? Their personalities. Okay. Do you know the difference between an addict and an alcoholic? They'll both steal your wallet, but the addict will help you look for it for half an hour. Okay. Unrelated subject. This man is visiting Israel and goes to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. He's standing there praying, and he sees this old man standing next to him, reading from the book and rocking back and forth. And when the man closes the book, he says to him, "Tell me something, mister, do you live here in Jerusalem?" He says, "Yeah, I've lived here for 30 years. "Do you come here to the wall often?" He says, "Yeah, every day I come here and I pray at the wall." "So what do you pray for?" "Well, I pray for world peace, and I pray for brotherhood between the Arabs and the Jews, and I pray that people will treat each other with love and with respect, and I pray for prosperity and peace around, brotherhood around the world." And the man says, "Tell me something, mister, do you think your prayers have been answered?" He says, "Answered? It's like talking to a wall." The man is waiting for a bus, and he notices that there's a row of shops. And in one of the shops is a clock in the window. So he figures the bus will be 30 minutes. He walks into the shop with a clock in the window. He sees an old man, long beard, reading a holy book. And he says, "Excuse me, mister, do you think you could repair my watch? It's running fast." He says, "No, I don't do that." He says, "Well, do you think you could clean it?" He says, "No, I don't do that either. I'm not a watchmaker." He says, "Well, what's your occupation? What do you do?" He says, I'm a moil." "What's a moil?" "I'm a ritual circumciser. I do ritual circumcisions." He says, "Well, why do you have a clock in the window?" He says, "Mister, what would you put in the window?" All right, these four addicts realize their dream. They save and they borrow, and they finally buy their own cattle ranch in Wyoming. So a friend phones to congratulate them, and he says, "So tell me, what did you decide to name the ranch?" And Addict Bob says, "Well, we argued and we thought about it, and we thought we'd come to blows, but finally we agreed to use all our ideas together. So we're calling it the Double R, Lazy L, Triple Horseshoe, Bar 7, Lucky Diamond Ranch." "Oh, yeah? So tell me, how many heads of cattle do you have?" "Oh, none of them survived the branding." Here's a more cerebral one. Comic Peter DeVries says, he says, "If you want my final opinion on the mystery of life and all that, I can give it to you in a nutshell. The universe is like a safe to which there is a combination, but the combination is locked up in the safe." And there's a bumper sticker I saw which goes, "I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming and yelling like the passengers in his car." And there's another bumper sticker which goes, "Don't believe in superstition, it brings bad luck." Just a few quotes for you. Louis Grizzard said, "Instead of getting married again, I'm going to find a woman I don't like and give her a house." George Carlin said, "If you can't beat them, arrange to have them beaten." Zsa Zsa Gabor said, "A man in love is not complete until he's married. Then he's finished." Zsa Zsa Gabor also said, "I'm a marvelous housekeeper, darling. Every time I leave a man, I keep his house." As I said before, I believe very deeply in the importance of humor. It keeps us breathing deeply. Now, if you start any spiritual discipline or any martial art, they won't get you to the serious stuff until you learn how to breathe. Deep breathing makes you calm, helps you get peaceful, helps change your mood to something more positive. And it doesn't matter if it's ho 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 or boo hoo hoo. It could be laughter or tears. Laughter is just more fun. You'll notice that if you breathe shallow, it gets you uptight. And you can make yourself uptight by breathing shallow. Also, you can make yourself relaxed by breathing deeply. So, I tell myself a joke. And sometimes I'm telling myself a funnier joke than the one I'm telling you. How did it happen? My childhood. I was born in Montreal, Canada in 1950, and I grew up in a middle-class family, nothing special. My family didn't seem like addicts that you could name, but there was certainly addiction in my family. You know, my grandfather had been a drunk. You know, nobody called him that. You wouldn't call people like that an alcoholic. He was a dear man. But my mother's father could put away a quart a day. And it was for his heart, of course. For medicinal purposes. And it's funny how, as intelligent a man as he was, nothing in his life ever seemed to work out right. He would never have thought to blame the booze. My childhood was nothing special except that I always felt like I didn't belong. I always felt like I was a world apart from. See, I had been taught to read when I was 3 and a half by my sister and my mother. And when I went to my first day of school, the kids were being taught look, book, up, and cup. And I already could read books. You know, if you think that made me popular among my classmates, you're crazy. Generally speaking, little kids don't like intellectuals. Generally speaking. And you know, insecure people don't like anybody who they think outclasses them. And little kids feel insecure. Believe me when I tell you that even though I'm better at some things than other people, there's plenty of people I feel insecure around about other stuff. And you know what? We're all like that. I believe a major part of our recovery is gaining a sense of security, because the fear that we live in is mainly a sense of insecurity. But if you knew God was with you, and you knew you couldn't fail, and you knew that there was love supporting you and uplifting you, could you ever feel that insecure? So my main problem then and now is a lack of faith. Don't get me wrong, I've got lots of faith. I just don't have enough, and I have to ask for more. From an early age, I had a hunger for God. I wanted to know God. I wanted to have a sense of God in my life. I heard people talking about God. I wasn't sure what they were saying, and I didn't know what they meant. I just knew that there was something special. And what I came to realize over time was that God seemed to not have anything special to say to me. In other words, throughout my teens, I was alienated not just from humanity, but from God. And I was a sullen teenager. I was distant. I scored in the stratosphere in all my standardized tests, but I had lousy grades. Because I was always reading, I was just never reading anything that was assigned. See? Rebel to the last. Like most addicts I know, I would not do what other people told me to do, even if I knew it was good for me. Maybe especially if I knew it was good for me, because I didn't want to be told what to do. Because of our insecurity, we have a tendency to be arrogant. There's a saying that an addict is the only person in the world who can look down on you while lying flat on his back in the gutter. I had a 15-year addict career. It started in January of 1970, and it ended in March of 1984. And in 1985, excuse me, those 15 years, I had my highs and my lows. And I won't kid you and say it was all bad. Because you know what? Whatever we are, we're not total fools. There was a time that drugs worked. There was a time that drugs were good. There was a time that using made my life more manageable, not less. Early in my active addiction, it made me relaxed. It made me feel at ease with others. It made me feel plugged in, tuned in. First time I used, somebody played Van Morrison's Astral Weeks for me on a stereo. And I heard these sounds and I said, oh, wow. And I couldn't imagine for years taking long drives or listening to music without being stoned. And I took all the psychedelics and hallucinogens that back in the early 70s people were wont to use. And I had spiritual experiences that were quite profound. So don't put down the usefulness of drugs under certain circumstances. In NA, we have no opinion on drugs, we have an opinion on addiction. If there's somebody who can use successfully, God bless them. I can't. That's the difference. Being an addict means that I've crossed all those lines and I cannot go back to manageable using. I've accepted that. Doesn't bother me anymore. In fact, I believe that I've traded in my right to get loaded for my right to have a happy and successful life. For me, that's a fair trade. I don't mind. My sufficient bottom, and I'm a great believer in sufficient bottoms, happened at the end of 84, beginning of 85. I had a string of tickets that I never paid. I ended up going to jail because I was stopped for driving on a suspended license. Never busted for drugs. You know, a lot of us don't. A lot of us just are unmanageable behind drugs, not in legal trouble. I was pretty good at being careful most of the time, except for that night I fell asleep in my parents' house, and they came home from their vacation early and found me asleep in their recliner with the drugs by my side. That was embarrassing, to say the least. My mother found out about NA, and she said, "You've got to go." "I'm doing it myself, Mom." Yeah, like we all do it ourselves. Yeah. And I attended one NA meeting in like October of 1984, and I saw a lot of spoiled middle-class kids with spoiled middle-class problems, and I wanted to go home and get loaded, and I did. But I heard something there. I heard a message. At first, I didn't believe I had ever relapsed, but I believe that if I heard the message of recovery and I used after that, then I relapsed. I had to go through a string of little bottoms. And the one that my sponsees are sick of hearing about was in November of '84, when I was behind my 3 locked doors hitting the pipe, and I paralyzed my diaphragm. And I was lying, gasping on the floor of my bathroom, "God, please save my life." And he did. You know, I was able to gasp my breath back, and an hour later I was hitting the damn pipe again. So I qualified. You know, in some towns they say you're qualifying at 8 o'clock. Oh, qualify for what? Well, that's what they mean, you're speaking. So from that little story, you know I qualify. I'm capable of doing something that is life-damaging in aid of my addiction. A sufficient bottom means it's enough for you. And I don't care if it came after 5 years or 15 years or 25 years. If it's a sufficient bottom for you, congratulations, you don't have to repeat it. I believe in knowing your enemy. And the disease of addiction is the enemy. A lot of us cooperate with our disease or accommodate our disease, but it's not our friend. It's out to get us. See, I don't believe in demonic possession, but it's a good model. I don't believe I'm possessed by demons, or I still would be. Or if the demons have been cast out, why do I still have these crazy thoughts? See? But it's a good model. It's as though there's a little portion of my intelligence that became separated when I was very young. And it became a law unto itself. And it began to dominate my consciousness. So it was like a part of me began to dominate the rest of me. And that part of me was this destructive force called the disease of addiction. Recovery is about winning my mind back. It takes effort. This program, like it or not, requires work. That's why they call it the steps and not the escalator. I believe in knowing your enemy. There's a whole string of insanities. My late sponsor used to say that when people say that insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, he says that's a better definition of denial. He said that insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again, knowing what the results will be and doing it anyway. And from that, I came to realize there were at least 12 insanities, and that I need a remedy for each insanity. Denial is the primary insanity of the first step. And it means like blinding ourselves to the truth. It's like, don't confuse me with the facts. I can't see you. And the opposite is acceptance. I need an antidote for each of these insanities. The opposite is acceptance. It's really important for me to practice the antidote on a regular basis. Hopelessness or despair or futility is the insanity of the second step. I also think that false beliefs is the insanity of the second step, and we have to have real beliefs. We have to believe in something real and something positive. Our beliefs have to change. One of the main problems that we have to deal with in recovery is penetrating an erroneous belief system. That we believed many things about life and about God and about reality that just weren't true. And the antidote for that is hope, which is the expectation of something positive. The insanity of the third step is self-centeredness, and the antidote is faith and God-centeredness. See, egomaniacs all. mismanagers all. But enough about me. Let me hear what you have to say about me. That's the insanity of our egomania. And I have to shift the focus from me. When I hear addicts say, well, I'm working on me this year. It's balance. The back of the coin says self-society, service, and God. If any part of that is missing, we've got an unbalanced program. And the insanity in the fourth step is irrational fear. We need courage to overcome our irrational fear. I believe that's also a character defect. That there's reasonable fear. I believe very strongly in rational fear. The rational fear of the edge of the cliff or of tigers in the forest. But if you're in the city and you're afraid of tigers in the forest, that's an irrational fear. If I'm around people who love me and support me and I'm afraid that they're going to expose me or they're going to ridicule me, it's an irrational fear. So part of it is breaking those old tapes and those old models and those old false versions of reality, which have led me to be afraid of things that I don't have to be afraid of. The insanity in the fifth step is rationalization. I bet you don't know the difference between rationalization and justification. When we rationalize, it's when we make something that's irrational, rational. We take something crazy and we say it makes perfect sense to me. That's a rationalization. A justification is when we take something that's unjust and we make it just. You do something wrong and you give it a good reason. That's a justification. And in the fifth step, I have to admit the nature of my wrongs. And it's not just my moral wrongs, thank you. It's all my wrongs. Wrong attitudes, wrong beliefs, wrong points of view, wrong presumptions. See, I presumed certain things about people and about life that were wrong. I had to begin to admit those. Sixth step, the insanity is resistance. Every bad monster movie, they say resistance is futile. Well, my problem was resistance. I resisted the truth. I resisted God's message for me. And stagnation and corruption and excess, these were all part of my insanity. And the antidote for my resistance is willingness. I have to break through that resistance with the willingness to change and the willingness to let God change me. The insanity in the seventh step is arrogance. People talk about pride, and there's a good kind of pride. That's when they told me when I was a kid, take pride in your appearance. Take pride in yourself, stand up straight, don't be ashamed of yourself. That's a good pride. Nothing wrong with that kind of pride. Just like there's good aspects of ego. Does God want me to annihilate my ego? I don't think so. I was created with an ego. My problem is having a sick ego. See? My problem is needing to be noticed for sick things. See? They examined chimpanzees to find out whether it was the bullies who dominated the tribe, and it wasn't. It was the show-offs. It was the ones who could put on the best display to the other chimps. So they took that to the playground, and they examined the kids in the playground to see if the bullies dominated the crowd. No, the kids didn't like the bullies. It was the show-offs who could get on the monkey bars and say, look at me, look at me. So one of the misconceptions we have is that nobody likes a show-off. It's not true. Everybody loves a show-off as long as they do it with style. What everybody doesn't like is a smartass. Arrogance. It's one of the nubs of my disease. And I have to humbly ask God to remove my arrogance and do for me what I can't do for myself. Guess what? God will do for me what I can't do for myself. He won't do for me what I can do for myself. And we may be knocking on the wrong door when we keep asking God to do those things for us that we should be doing for ourselves. Very important that we sort that out. Eighth step, shamelessness was my insanity. When I made my list, I had a good sense of shame. It's important to have a healthy sense of shame. I was ashamed of the wrong things I'd done and the harm I had caused, and I wanted to set it right. And it wasn't just about going to someone and saying, I'm sorry. After the age of 9, most people realize that I'm sorry and I promise are not magic words. Many addicts don't find that out until they're 40. But you know, if you're saying to the IRS, I'm sorry, or when the cop, when the boss says, where were you the last 3 days? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I promise. In real life, it doesn't work anymore. And we must get real. The antidote for my shamelessness was brotherly love and forgiveness. And why does brotherly love fit in the 8th step? You know, I struggled with this for a while. I didn't know what they meant. And what I came to understand was that when people speak of brotherly love, that means that you want something good for someone else that you don't own the results of. Well, so why do people keep saying that I do my amends for me, not for them? There has to be another component to it. I think this is one of our common misconceptions. I do my amends for myself, for society, for service, and for God. If I do my amends only for myself, then I have only a selfish motive. There are people who carry a stone in their heart for the harm I caused them years ago. When I come up to them and make amends to them and tell them, I did you wrong and I want to do something to make amends and make up in some way for the harm I caused, I'm giving them the opportunity to forgive me. I'm sticking my neck out and saying, you know, you could chop it off if you want, but I want to make up to you. I want to do something right for a change. And I want you to know that you don't have to carry that stone in your heart anymore. You can forgive me. If they forgive me, they get a stone out of their heart, and their life is a little bit more healed. And that's the brotherly love of our steps. That we begin to care not just about what's going to happen to me, but what's going to happen to other people too. Because we're interconnected, we're interdependent. I need the whole world. The world is my playground and it's also my university. And if part of it is missing, I'm lacking part of my education and I'm also lacking part of my fun. The insanity in the 9th step was irresponsibility. Not taking responsibility for my actions. And when I go and make those amends, or wrong or right, I'm taking responsibility. I'm owning my results. And it takes discipline. That's the antidote. You know, work through it. Even if it means paying something off for years. I don't believe God wants us to hurt ourselves, you know, in the process. If paying off all of your debts right now would put you into bankruptcy, I don't think that's God's will. If admitting your wrongs to the police will put you in jail and then your family will starve, I doubt that that's God's will, except when to do so would injure them or others. We don't compound a wrong by doing more wrong. It's important for us to remember that. There's lots of buts in the steps and in the traditions. So when addicts tell you everything after but is bullshit, that's bullshit. There's a lot of buts. That's part of a more mature spirituality. We want things real simplistic. Simplistic isn't the same thing as simple. My problem in the 10th step was perfectionism, trying to micromanage everything. You know? We continued to take a personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Personal inventory isn't the same thing as another moral inventory. I've already taken a moral inventory. Why should I take another one? Personal inventory is an inventory of my person, an inventory of my personality, an inventory of my personal choices. Am I the person I want to be? Am I living the personal life that I want to live? That's my inventory in the 10th step, not whether I'm still hurting people. If I'm still hurting people, I need to work step 1 through 9 over again. Problem is, am I still hurting me? These are not necessarily moral choices, they're personal choices. Am I selling myself short? Am I selling out? Am I not doing the right thing consistently for the right reason? Am I doing things by force of habit, or am I doing things because I know it's God's will for me? See? And when I'm wrong, promptly admitted it. Here's the beauty of the 10th step. Promptly can mean anything. Promptly can mean 6 years. Promptly can mean before it leaves my lips. The gift of this step is that if I take my personal inventory regularly, not ruthlessly, but regularly, then I find that I stop myself before I do wrong. Isn't that a hoot? The gift of this program is that we gain the ability to restrain ourselves, to practice some self-restraint, a very important spiritual principle, I might add. To practice some self-restraint before we find ourselves acting out insanely, or even slightly. I've heard addicts say, well, I didn't get here to be a saint. Didn't want to be no saint, just wanted to stop getting loaded. Well, I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of saints in NA. Because what's a saint? A saint is a person whose life hit the bottom, hit the dark night of the soul. And in that dark night, they found a connection to a higher power of their understanding. And then miracles happened in their life, and then they became capable of acting out miracles in the lives of others. We do that here all the time, but we don't call it saint because it's an anonymous program. We want nothing more than to help somebody else recover. That's amazing. And we'll go to any lengths to carry a message of recovery. That's amazing. Just to finish the series, the insanity in the 11th step is materialism. Bringing things, everything down to its material bottom line. What's the bottom line? You know, this stuff. Well, sometimes I need to look for the top line. How high can I reach? What's God's will for me? And what's the power to carry that out? See, one of the problems that we face, one of the misconceptions you hear in the rooms is powerlessness. We fall in love with powerlessness, as though that's a good thing. I admitted I was powerless. I'm not supposed to stay that way. If I was still as powerless today as the day I walked in, I might use. And the likelihood of that is much less today than it was the day I walked in, because I have a portable program that I carry with me where I go. See? And I have the love of other addicts who support me wherever I go. So, if you're powerless, get empowered. We get empowered by a higher power, by the power of this fellowship and these addicts, and by our own better judgment and better will. You do have one. It just hasn't always been engaged. We do have a better will. And when addicts say, "Thy will, not mine, be done," I don't buy that at all. I don't believe that God wants me to not have a will, or for me to deny my will. I'm supposed to have a will. What I'm supposed to do is find a way for it to come into sync with God's will. I need my will to be the same as God's will. I need to say, not thy will, not mine, be done, but God, help my will be the same as yours. Help me want for me what you want for me. Help me know what you want, and help me get the power to carry it out. Knowledge and power. Nothing wrong with knowledge and power in the right hands. When I was brand new, March 21st of 1985, my first day clean, I would not have trusted myself with an ounce of knowledge and power. I would have messed up whatever knowledge and power I had. Today, and if you have more than a few months, excuse me, you can be trusted with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of power. The insanity in the 12th step is selfishness. You know, I hear people say this is a selfish program, another common misconception of NA. It doesn't sound that way to me. It sounds like an unselfish program for selfish people. You know, otherwise, why would we be called upon to give it away? The antidote is selfless service and comprehension. Comprehension means to see the whole picture of it, to practice these principles in all our affairs, not just a few of them. See, we gain a comprehensive view of life and God and the steps. That doesn't mean I comprehend God. See, I do have a God of my understanding, and that just means a God I can stand under, like an umbrella of grace. See, will I ever understand God fully? No, I'd be crazy to assume I will. So, what is recovering? Recovering isn't just coming around. One of my friends, my friend Kermit, says that there's a lot of addicts who say, well, I've spent so many years around the program. He says, well, you know that means that somebody has relapsed many times when they say, I've been around the program. He says, you can stop orbiting around the program and you can come in for a landing. Addicts calling one another recovering just because they attend meetings is a lot like politicians calling each other honorable gentlemen just because they got elected. Spiritual is as spiritual does. Recovering is as recovering does. If we're staying clean but living dirty, forget what that says to the newcomer. How much does that tear you apart? How much does that pull you in two when you're talking one thing and acting another? Now, we can live clean lives if we want it. It's a question of intent. Do you want it? Do you want a clean life? Another insanity of my disease is extremism. It's the inability to find balance and to trust moderation and to identify shades of gray. See, there are subtleties in this life, and I have to be alert to those subtleties. That's part of being mature, not insisting upon a simple answer with the cowboys and Indians and bang bang, and the story goes on. After the good guy shoots the bad guy, the story goes on. The bad guy might have a wife and kids at home who are now orphans. Don't oversimplify your life. We can find simple solutions to our problems, but that doesn't mean there aren't subtleties. And if we want too simple an answer, we might not be looking deep enough. Another problem with our way of thinking is self-destructiveness. And that's cruel judgment upon self and life. And in order to antidote my self-destructiveness, I have to have appreciation and gratitude. I'm a grateful addict, and I've been told that a grateful addict won't use. I'm grateful for you, and I'm grateful for the program, and I'm grateful that God loves me. And I'm grateful that God loves you too. Misery. It's a major component of my disease of addiction. Misery is just melodramatic wallowing. Oh, ain't it awful? I've heard addicts say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, and I don't know that that's completely true. I think this is another misconception or oversimplification. I think it's misery that's optional. If you see someone suffering from cancer, or an animal or a child that's suffering in pain, and you walk up to them and heartlessly say, well, your suffering is optional. I think that I don't have a right to judge someone else's suffering. But I do have something to say about misery, because most misery is self-inflicted. If I'm miserable, it's mostly because of what I'm telling myself, and I'm telling myself the wrong things. There's joy in this life, and the antidote to my misery is joy. I need to enjoy my life. I was taught years ago that there's an 8 aspect to the program, or an 8-fold program. And this means meetings, steps, sponsorship, fellowship, reading and writing, prayer and meditation, the 1,000-pound telephone, and service. And if I'm doing all those things, then I have a rich, well-balanced program. And if I'm only going to meetings, then I'm only availing myself of 1/8 of the program. See, there's a lot we can do for our recovery that we might have shortchanged ourselves about. What is a new way of life? A new way of life largely consists of finding a higher and nobler purpose. We talk about purpose in our traditions. What the ultimate purpose of me as an addict, at first I thought, was just to stay clean. But I kept hearing in the traditions that the purpose of our groups is to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. And you know, the longer I'm clean, the more that's part of my purpose too. I have a purposeful life. I carry a message. I'm not just in this for me anymore. That gives me and deepens my sense of purpose. There's other purposes you can have, and there's nothing wrong with those purposes. But being aimless and having no sense of purpose, that's where I started. See, it's okay for you to have goals. Just trust that the results will be taken care of by God. If you haven't yet, you will. The saying, if you haven't been through it yet, you will. If you haven't mourned or grieved in recovery, stay clean long enough, eventually you will. If you haven't had brilliant success, stay clean long enough, you will. If you haven't been through months of boredom where you don't know whether your recovery means anything anymore, stick around, you will. You know, we're human. We go through ups and downs, but you know what? The roller coaster levels off over time, and the variations become a little clearer to see. I hear some addicts say, I'm definitely an addict. They introduce you and say, I'm David, I'm definitely an addict. Well, what are the rest of us? Sort of addict? We're all definitely addicts, or we all definitely wouldn't be here. I heard an interviewer talking to a famous person a few days ago, and wonderful things were happening in her life. She was getting awards, she was getting new roles, and he said, you know, did you ever think this would happen at this age in your life? She says, every morning I think that the fraud police are going to show up. And the interviewer said, oh, you too? And I thought to myself, wow, so it's not just us addicts who think that the fraud police are going to show up every day. See, we get a wonderful life. We get amazing things happen to us, and we're afraid that it's all going to be taken away. Just keep practicing principles in all your affairs, and it won't be taken away. It's yours by right. See, what's a good day? Some days I think, well, I'm just having a bad day. John Wayne, of all people, he was in one of his last roles, and Lauren Bacall was in it. He was dying of cancer, and he didn't talk about it. You know, stoic to the last, right? And Lauren Bacall said, isn't it a beautiful day? And John Wayne said, you know, any day I wake up is a beautiful day. I have to remember what I have to be grateful for. I nearly died. Some ideas. Some of these spiritual traditions and will whisper in your ear in some of the initiations. They'll say, ye are as gods. And what the hell does that mean? Well, it means that we have all the creative ability to create our own lives, or to recreate our own lives, or to have a creative effect upon the world around us, if we so choose. We can live on the animal level, we can live on the divine level at the same time. It's amazing. But see, there's one way that we can prove that we are as gods, and that's to be loving. You heard the saying, God is love? The more loving we are, the more love is in our hearts and in our lives, the more we are imitating God. The God of my understanding has chosen not to be all-powerful. See, he gives some of his power to us. He's also allowed a random factor to intersect with the law as we understand it. So there's accident and there's law, and they intersect at every level of the universe. I mean, there are galaxies colliding at this moment. I can't imagine a worse accident. I mean, if I think I have problems, imagine being on a planet in a galaxy that's colliding with another galaxy. You know, goodbye. My life is pedestrian and very plain and ordinary by comparison. And God has chosen not to be all-powerful. God has chosen not to be all-knowing. He's as interested in what's going to happen next as we are. I don't believe God has figured this all out from the very beginning. That would be a very dull universe for God. I think God's smarter than that. I don't think we're all predestined. Like I said, that's that random factor. In fact, they call it in physics the uncertainty principle. It operates throughout the universe. We can never be absolutely sure what's going to happen. It's like the shuffling of the gene pool. All kinds of accidents happen, and sometimes they're happy accidents. But what I do believe God is God is all loving. That's how I know for sure I'm not God. Does God love Hitler? Absolutely. Does God stop Hitler? Only through us. God has chosen not to be all-powerful. Could God have stopped Hitler? Apparently that's not the rules of the game. See, one of the worst problems we have in being disappointed with God is that we misunderstand the rules of the game. The rules of the game is that God is much less interfering than we might want him to be. The God of my understanding does not interfere in every moment of my life like a nervous parent. See, he'll let me make mistakes. He'll even let me kill myself with drugs if I want to. See, God will not prevent horrible catastrophes from happening, but he'll hold our hands if we ask him to get through them. If I want comfort and help and solace and courage from God, I can ask for it and I'll get some. If I want a calm and peaceful life, I might not get that from God. There's an old Chinese curse which says, "May you live in interesting times." And we do, and I do. What God will give me is the strength to cope if I want it. Or I can go to pieces if I want that. You have the option. There are some simple pointers or tips that I'd offer any sponsee or newcomer. One of them is, you hear it over and over again, give yourself a break. And I would interpret that as be kind to yourself. Let up on yourself a little. Don't be so damn hard on yourself. You've suffered enough. There's nobody who's a worse critic of me than me. And giving myself a break means to let up a little and accept that God loves me, so who am I to argue with God? See? And I've heard addicts say, be as grateful for what God has taken away as for what he has given. God has taken away my desire to use. He's taken away some other stuff that I clung to too. And I'm very grateful when I think about it. I've also heard it said, if you can't find the truth right where you are, where else do you think you will find it? There's no place to go and there's nothing to do. Well, there are some things to do. But right here is just fine to start recovering. Don't wait for the next convention. I would suggest to a newcomer too to eat healthy and take vitamins and exercise and get enough rest. If we ignore the physical, we ignore the base. A lot of us lived for years on the cheeseburger and French fry diet, if that, because as long as there was still money for dope, why spend it on nourishment and vitamins and being healthy? See, we have to repair the damage, and we also have to accept that we're getting older. It's too late for me to die young. I'm 49 years old. There's an old saying, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. It's never too late to start taking better care of yourself. And if your sponsor eats lousy and doesn't take vitamins, you don't have to copy him in every respect. You can take vitamins on the sly. And if anybody is telling you that if you pop a vitamin C pill you're using, please, we're here about stuff that gets you loaded, not vitamin C. Anyway, that's Christian Science. It's not Narcotics Anonymous. Not that I have anything against Christian Science, if that's what you believe. Just don't impose that on your sponsees if that's not what they believe. I'd also suggest to a newcomer to listen to music and watch comedy and see nature and get rest and recreation. All those things build the soul and ennoble us and help us to feel more in tune and in touch. And it gives us a cheap thrill. In fact, I always tell my sponsees that at least 2 or 3 times a week they have to watch stand-up comedy, either in person or on television, because they got to break their crystallization. They got to start laughing again. I would also suggest to put certain principles before some of the other ones. Certain principles have to be practiced from the start. One of them is consideration. To start becoming considerate of other people's feelings and not demand that everything be all about you. Another is respect. To show a little respect to people, even if they didn't do anything to earn your respect. It's irrelevant. The fact that they're here and they're human is sufficient for them to be respected. I feel the same about animals myself. I respect every creature's right to live. At least until I eat them. No, just kidding. Actually, I was a vegetarian for 25 years. And a year ago, after several years of sore joints and not being able to lose weight and having chronic indigestion, I finally heard about Eat Right for Your Type, and I found out I'm a type O, blood type O, and that I should be eating some animal food. So I started eating fish for the first time in 25 years. Boy, was my face red. To all the vegetarians out there, God bless you. If it's the most appropriate diet for your health, that's wonderful. But I don't believe that God wants me to be in ill health for the sake of a fish. See? So I've stopped judging other people for their dietary habits. But I would say if you're eating anything, eat consciously. Be aware of what you're doing to yourself. There's a vibration to every food. And you don't want to be taking in negative vibrations. And the other principle I would put above others is forgiveness. I have to forgive myself for not having been perfect. And I have to forgive God for not having created a perfect universe. And I have to forgive other people for not always having been nice to me. You know what? We're all flawed. Maybe even God isn't as perfect as we might want to think. You know, Gary Larson, the guy who does the Far Side cartoons, has a picture of maybe this universe is God's 8th grade science project. Maybe we're dealing with a God who's just coming out of adolescence. It's a young universe. Maybe that explains the mess things are in. I don't know. All I know is God has a sense of humor, so he's not going to... Just kidding. He's not going to be furious at me for making a little fun. The power of suggestion. Suggestions can affect our health. For example, if you're convinced that you're destined to be ill, you probably will be. You know, we heard a hypnotist the other night. We can talk ourselves into anything, you know. If we come to believe that we can be healed, we probably will be. Suggestions. Suggestions can mold our whole lives. A child told often enough that he is worthless and stupid and no good will come to believe it and learn to act it out in his life. You know, there's no degree to be a parent, you know. Parents who haven't become adults can't afford to let their kids become adults. That's how it was for my parents, or at least my dad. He couldn't afford to let me grow up. You know, even when I was acting a lot more grown up than him, he still had to lecture me on what I had to do, even though it didn't make any sense anymore. I also like the saying, there are no illegitimate children, only illegitimate parents. Yeah. Yeah. See, reality is more plastic than we realize. Your reality may differ from mine for very good reasons. You're imagining and creating a universe all by yourself. I think that's part of our creative potential. We're powerful beings, we just don't know it. Sometimes it's a good thing we don't know it. We would abuse our power. That which you believe is true becomes true for you. I used to believe that my life was like a soap opera, and that misery and sorrow were inevitably my lot in life, and so that became true for me. As I began to understand the importance of spiritual imagination, I began to envision life as a wonderful experience, a magical journey, and a great adventure. And so it has become more and more like that. When I believed people were mean and that no one liked me, that was true. When I came to believe that the universe was full of love, and everyone, and especially God, loved me, that became true for me. I'm coming more and more to believe that Spirit guides me and speaks to me through signs, through others, and through my intuition. And so it becomes more true in my life. We create our reality by deciding the kind of life that we want to live. If you want to live a magical, wonderful life, start envisioning it and do not poison it with doubt. If you believe it, in time you will see it. One of the things we do every day here is ask for wisdom. You may not notice it, but in your serenity prayer you ask for serenity, courage, and wisdom. Guess what? By now you got some. We put ourselves down. Well, I'm only an addict, or I'm just a hope-to-die dope fiend, all this stuff. No, you're a child of God, and you've gained a little wisdom over time. Don't shortchange yourself. We can cultivate logic and intuition. We can cultivate gifts of the mind and gifts of the spirit if we want to. It's just a matter of what you want. We can seek knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. We can gain a sense of the miraculous in our lives. We can permit ourselves to be spiritual and successful. It's not an either-or proposition. And we can use the experience that we've been given. I've heard addicts say again and again that coincidence is just God acting anonymously. I think there are some coincidences that aren't God acting anonymously, but I will buy that. Very often coincidence is God acting anonymously, but I will add something of my own to that. And that is that miracles are just God breaking his anonymity. Sometimes God wants us to know he's there. Kitschy coo, guess who? So what is God's will for us? It's for each creature to be true to itself, to be faithful to its own nature, to grow into its own innate capacity for greatness and goodness. There was a rabbi. I have a Jewish tradition. I also have a Muslim tradition and a Christian and a Buddhist and a Hindu tradition, which I've read extensively on. I love them all. I don't take any of them seriously anymore. But there was a rabbi called Rabbi Nachman who was crying one day, and his disciples were saying, "Rabbi, why are you crying?" He says, "Because I believe God is disappointed in me." "How could God be disappointed in you, Rabbi? You're like a Moses to us." He says, "No, I don't have to be Moses." He said, "God won't. When I meet my Creator, God will not ask, 'Why were you not Moses?' He will rather ask, 'Why were you not Rabbi Nachman?'" I have to be true to myself. Whatever my nature is, I don't have to be you. Thank God. You have to be you. There's a saying that if everybody's troubles were put in a bag, like a bag of shit, and nailed to the wall, and on the word 1, 2, 3, go, everybody could take their selection of a bag of troubles, everybody would knock everybody else down to get to their own bag of troubles. Why? Because better the hell you know than the hell you don't. I don't know how you cope with life and with reality. I just know how I do. They say relate, don't compare. I have to improve the way I deal with reality. Your mileage may vary, and how you deal with reality is up to you. The most important way I get there, to a sense of enlightenment. So what is enlightenment anyway? It's being a light to others. It's like carrying a lamp, like the Statue of Liberty. We do that all the time when we sponsor. You know, we're being enlightened beings. We're shining a light on the path for other people. And one of the ways we get there is by unlearning. You know, a lot of people comment on spirituality in Star Wars. One of the best lines is when Yoda says, "You have to unlearn what you have learned." Guess what? Every spiritual tradition, when you get to the deep stuff, every spiritual tradition says that. You know, all the stuff you've been programmed with, you're going to have to unlearn. We have to become free agents and clear our minds of some of the claptrap that we've come to believe. You know, I respect everybody's right to believe anything. I have a sponsee who's a devoted Christian. And one of the things he told me was, the only regret I have for you, he said, was that Jesus isn't your personal Savior. And I said, listen, if Jesus said to you today, follow me, what do you think he would mean? He said, I don't know, do as I do? I said, bingo. It isn't what you believe that, this is my personal belief. It isn't what you believe that counts, it's what you do. You know, Jimmy Carter said, well, I've lusted in my heart. Sorry, I don't think it counts. I've done lots of things in my heart. But the record is what I've done. See? And a loving God of my understanding will not hold against me that I have held false beliefs. If there is a record, it's what I choose to do. And just for today, I choose to do the right thing for the right reason if I possibly can, and not to kid myself that the wrong thing I do is for the right reason. You know, one of my sponsees says, I asked God, just for today, God, could I do the wrong thing and have the right thing happen? And, you know, hey, whatever game you want to play, it's fine, you know. Don't say, God, remove my doubt and fear. Rather say, God, grant me faith and courage. Don't ask for the removal of a negative. Rather ask for the giving of a positive. It's easier that way. It's easier. Once I have faith and courage, the doubt and the fear will dissipate. See, I don't ask God to do for me what I can't do for myself. The God of my understanding is an unending fountain of spiritual principles. He'll give me all I want. Will he give me change for a quarter? No. I can do that for myself. Can God be impersonal and personal at the same time? Sure, why not? You know, I can have an impersonal and a personal relationship with God at the same time. Why not? Why would I want to limit God? Why would I want to put obstructions or limitations on what God can do for me? There's a saying, name it and you can have it. I don't think it works that way with God. I think the more we try to define God, the less God is to us. So that's why I have very little use for theology these days. I'm non-theological. I believe that God puts up or shuts up. See, God puts it on the table, and it's up to us to enjoy the feast that he's laid out for us, or to walk away and say, well, he wasn't serving what I liked. See? You know, I think maybe God does respect piety, you know, when people are very religious, but I don't know that that's that important. I know, however, that God loves us for goodness. And I don't mean just being a good little boy or a good little girl. I mean doing something good, being good at something. So whether you're good at tennis, or whether you're good at acting, or whether you're good at driving, or whether you're good at being a good father or mother, be good at something. See, it's one thing to be mediocre at everything. I don't mind not knowing anything about the statistics of pro football. I'm good at something else. There's a teacher who said, to the question of your life, you are the answer. And to the problem of your life, you are the solution. We keep looking for our answers somewhere else. And it's been in our heart all along. It's always been right here. There's no place to go and there's nothing to do. Much of what we addicts have to overcome is simply being big babies. We suffer from profound immaturity, arrested development, and infantile attitudes. A lot of us operate like 14-year-olds most of the time. We have to grow up intellectually, emotionally, morally, and spiritually. I like the rule, never act less than half your age. Now, there are many ways that a person grows up. How do you become an adult spiritually? The one way is that you stop thinking only of yourself. Another is that you start becoming more aware of the long-term consequences of your actions, and you take into account the feelings and needs of others. Another is that you start seeking to learn what you can do to help and uplift and bless and provide for and protect and strengthen others. And you start wanting to learn this, not just to be noticed or appreciated, but out of generosity of spirit, because you genuinely love them and you care about them and you want to help them. I think that every good parent has an element of spiritual maturity because they love. We also begin to overcome negative reactions like fear and blame and vulnerability and neediness. And we stop projecting weakness or frailty to get what we want. And instead we start radiating our own power. This is spiritual maturity. We also learn to forgive others and ourselves for not being perfect and for being fallible. And we learn to forgive God for not giving us a perfect world or a perfect life. And we learn to appreciate what we have and to welcome the truth and to honor all kinds of goodness and to graciously mark the passing of all those things that will never come again. And seventh, we consult God and we invite His input into all our decisions. That's a sign of spiritual maturity. So meaning and purpose. I made you a promise at the beginning that I would talk about the meaning of life and the purpose of life. Think of it this way. All attempts to amass power and possessions are ultimately meaningless because everything is transitory and impermanent. What do the Beatles say? You don't take nothing with you but your soul? You could amass a fortune and you can't leave it to yourself. So the only thing that lasts are God, the personal soul, and the connection that we make from soul to God. So, the thing that gives life meaning is centering our efforts on the only things that last. This means that transcending impermanence is the meaning of life. This means that we become like the eye in the hurricane. Things swirl around us, but we have a calm in the middle because we know what's important. If there's any meaning to life, it's the meaning that we connect to God with. Otherwise, it's just like Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. And you end up with just a big joke. There are three purposes to life, not just one. Like the three legs of a stool that gives it stability. First, to learn and to grow. Second, to love and to share. Third, to enjoy and to celebrate. All these are important. And whatever does not aid the discovery of this meaning and the expression of these purposes is just dust in the wind and a waste of precious time. We're supposed to be celebrating our lives, not just complaining, woe is me, ain't it awful. We're supposed to be loving and sharing and enjoying the company of each other. We're supposed to be learning and growing and not saying my education is complete. These are the things that give my life purpose. If you don't have a sense of purpose in your life, you can create one. Don't wait for me. Don't wait for God to come along and strike you with a magic wand. It doesn't happen that way. God is the perfect gentleman, or lady if you prefer. God will not force me to take anything against my will, even spirituality. If I want it, I can have it. In fact, all I have to do is ask for it. If I come to it and I embrace it and I say, please give me more, God will. But He's not a bully and He won't ram it down my throat. That's why you can walk through a whole life without God and think yourself happy. But if you want it, you could have it. So, got to skip over some stuff. I got too much stuff. Just a couple of service tips. Throw away the old meeting lists and buy new ones. The most important piece of literature we have is the meeting list because it shows you where to go next. We shouldn't trick newcomers by giving them directions to a place that has closed. So invest in new meeting lists. Don't be cheap for a 10-cent meeting list. Put out new ones. Greet newcomers personally. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. It's one of the most rewarding things we do in service. Never pass the basket in the dark. God wants us to be loving, not suckers. Accept the inevitable reality of business and business meetings. See, we contribute through our actions, and if we don't contribute anything, then we feel like a parasite, and our recovery will feel hollow. If you can't contribute anything with money, that's fine. Come to a business meeting and contribute your presence and your ideas. See, like it or not, the whole thing that makes this convention go on is that there were a lot of business meetings that led up to it. And planning and organizing and people making an effort to make it happen. Didn't just happen by accident. Of the rooms of recovery. Go to a business meeting. Also, I would say ambition is an addictive drug. Possibly a dangerous addictive drug, too. So remember that there's never a shortage of people who want to be the king of all NA, but there's never enough good group secretaries. So I've been taught to accept paradox, that one of the aspects of spiritual maturity is the acceptance of paradox. In other words, sometimes things just don't seem to fit. For instance, we're always alone, but we're never alone. Nobody can sit in my skin with me, but God will go through everything with me if I let Him. We can never be sure of God's will. We already know everything that we need to do God's will. We have all the time in the universe, but we haven't a moment to waste. And the ultimate paradox that we deal with here every day is we keep what we have only by giving it away. If I've shared something with you enough for you to understand it, I've understood it. And then it's mine forever. If you really want to grasp something, try to explain it to somebody. By sharing, we make this our own. Every time I'm asked to come share somewhere, I like to have a closing prayer that I compose for the occasion, because it makes me feel like I'm communicating not just with you, but also with God. You know, I like us to bring God into the procedure. And the closing prayer I came up with this time goes, God, dear God, please help me unlearn what I have learned that isn't so. Help me find a new birth of enthusiasm and commitment for my recovery. Help me know when to be silent. Help me find good souls to share my heart and truth with. Help me stop wasting time and get on with life. Help me carry light where there is darkness, and water where there is thirst, and love where there is sadness, and healing where there is pain. Help me learn to want what you want for me. Help me awaken to all I am within and may become. Help me enjoy and celebrate the unfolding of my spirit. Help me hear your voice in all my fellow people, and especially in my fellow addicts. Help me carry the message without fear or doubt. And help me be healed and whole and loving and free. See, we have but a daily reprieve. Just for today, I want to ask God in to my life and yours. Thanks very much for letting me share.